UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn has denounced a manifesto released recently by the Tories. Corbyn said Prime Minister Boris Johnson's manifesto does not offer any hope to British citizens. He added that it's just the continuation of what the Labour Party had presented for the last 9 years. Corbyn called the document very disappointing and something that favours the rich at the expense of everyone else.
The Conservative Party is launching its manifesto. A manifesto paid for by billionaires, written for billionaires, and will be delivered for billionaires, but the problem is the rest of us will have to pay for it. Well, it won't get it done, and the Prime Minister knows it won't get it done because he's talking about a trade deal with the United States which would take 7 years to negotiate, a free trade deal with Europe alongside that which would take at least 3 years to negotiate. It's not going to get it done at all. And he knows the price of the deal with the United States is the opening up of our public services, including the National Health Service, to American companies. And I think he ought to be straight with the British people. It's not going to get it done, and he knows it.
Prime Minister Johnson promised to get Brexit done and forge a new Britain. He said the government is to employ tens of thousands of nurses and prevent tax rises. Johnson also pledged that Brexit would face no more delays. The 59-page manifesto comes 18 days before the general elections. The document is revealed after the Conservative Party faced an array of failures to get lawmakers' approval for its Brexit deal. Joining us for more on that is Steve Keen, Professor of Economics and the author of Debunking Economics. And we also have Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor at Politics First. Now, Mr. Keen, if I can start with you, what do you make of Johnson's manifesto? They usually start these manifestos with big promises and then lead to something they'll kind of spiral downhill.
Well, I think this has been downhill all the way. I mean, the only real thing he's been doing is promising Brexit, which was the same thing as May. I think he's more likely to deliver it than May, but there's no real change there. The big change is that May was still continuing on the austerity policies that have been both unsuccessful economically and incredibly unpopular in the UK for the last almost decade now. What Johnson is promising is a large funding boost to partly reverse that austerity, but I think, like a lot of Johnson's promises, I'll believe that when I see it.
Right, and Mr. Papadopoulos, Johnson's promising to employ tens of thousands of nurses and prevent tax rises. Was it not the Conservative Party under which Johnson was part of that was part of the austerity measures that cut police forces and nurses and all other you know, firefighters? If correct me if I'm mistaken.
Well, of course, the coalition government came to be in 2011, and in 2011, Mr. Johnson was Mayor of London. He was not in the House of Commons. Mr. Johnson returned as a Member of Parliament, the Conservative Member of Parliament for the seat of Uxbridge, at the 2015 general election. So he was not MP during the years of the coalition government. So he can say that he had nothing to do with the austerity measures. But at the same time, Mr. Johnson has said that cuts were absolutely necessary and that some of the cuts introduced by David Cameron were required in order to kickstart the UK economy. But it has to be said that whatever Jeremy Corbyn claims, however hard he tries, he knows, as does the rest of the country, that this general election is about Brexit. That is why Boris Johnson has called an early general election. And in doing so, Boris Johnson is taking an enormous gamble, because for Mr. Johnson's gamble to pay off, he has to win this election with a majority. So Mr. Johnson has to win around 330 MPs in order for there to be a working majority for a Conservative government. If he doesn't win with a majority, there's no point Mr Johnson winning but without a majority, i.e. the Conservatives are the largest party in the House of Commons, but not enough to form a government, then Mr Johnson's days in number 10 will be numbered. But as it goes at the moment, and going by opinion polls, and remember opinion polls are just a snapshot of how people are feeling at the time, Mr Johnson's stance on Brexit is going down well. Conversely, Jeremy Corbyn's stance on the EU, on Brexit, is not going down well. If we have a look in the Labour heartlands, in areas like Bolsover and Bishop Auckland, which are traditional white working class Labour areas, it looks like the Conservatives could capture those seats. Why? Because the Labour heartlands are overwhelmingly anti-EU. Even though Mr Corbyn personally loathes the European Union, he has appeased the Parliamentary Labour Party, by which I mean Labour MPs, by saying he would support a second referendum and he would remain neutral. Now, anyone aspiring to become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, or indeed any other country in the world, can simply not say to their public that they would remain neutral on a subject, let alone a subject as important as Brexit. So if Mr Johnson does win on December the 12th with a majority, then it will be down to his stance on Brexit, and Jeremy Corbyn would have lost because of his stance on Brexit.
Okay, let's stay with Brexit. And Mr Keane, do you think Jeremy Corbyn has let his party down in a way, in the sense that he hasn't got a firm position on Brexit, or does he have a firm position on Brexit?
Well, I think his party let him down, frankly. I've never seen a party try to assassinate its own leader as much as they've done to Jeremy Corbyn. So the fact that he's still there and hasn't been broken, I think, is a tribute to his personal strength. On the Brexit itself, this is just psychological guessing. He may well have been, he's known as a Eurosceptic. I think it's an extremely sensible position to hold. Whether he voted for Brexit or was against it, I don't know. But again, when I look at the campaign records, he campaigned on the Brexit vote with the party position, which was to oppose Brexit, far more than most of the candidates in his own party have accused him of not working hard enough. So I think it's quite a strange position that the Labour Party's taken against its own leader, and that may be one of the major reasons they lose the election.
Yeah, Mr. Papadopoulos, we've seen this kind of smear campaign against Corbyn with all this anti-Semitic remarks, and those who know Jeremy Corbyn and have known him for a long time, he's been an MP for some 20-odd years, say that he doesn't have an anti-Semitic bone in his body. Would you go along with that?
Well, first of all, Jeremy Corbyn was elected as an MP at the 1983 general election. So, you know, he's been in the House of Commons for nearly 4 decades. And I agree with with the other guest that the treatment which has been meted out against Jeremy Corbyn has been absolutely appalling. Not only has Mr Corbyn had to contend with the Conservative Party, he has also had to contend with British mainstream media and also his own party, not the Labour movement, but Labour MPs. And anyone who knows Jeremy Corbyn will say this: even if you disagree with every one of his convictions, even if you disagree wholeheartedly with his ideology, it is simply an absolute disgusting lie to claim that that man is racist. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't have one racist bone in his body. The allegations against him that he is anti-Semitic are unfounded and are politically motivated. They have been put together to try and bring him down. Why? Because he poses the ultimate threat to the British establishment in this country, in that he believes in no further wars of intervention involving Britain, and he believes in renationalisation, and also, and very importantly, he is pro-Palestine. And it is simply inconceivable for elements of the British establishment, for example, British mainstream media, to have a prime minister who has been extremely critical of the Israeli state and who is pro-Palestine. That's what these attacks are about. There is simply no sincere case. It is simply untenable to argue that Jeremy Corbyn is racist.
Okay.
It's absolute nonsense.
Sure. One final question. I'm afraid we're running out of time. Just one final question I'd like to pose to both of you. Mr. Keane, you first. Say Mr. Prime Minister Boris Johnson gets the majority that he needs to get his Brexit deal through Parliament. Is it the same Brexit deal that was voted on by the British people during the referendum?
No. I mean, the Brexit is the actual concept is very hard to define to begin with, because the European Union was never designed to shrink. It's always been designed to expand. So it's a bit like an Irish divorce. You have no idea who's going to get what. And so there's no way it could be known about before it. Again, Brexit was the baby of austerity. And it's rather a tragedy that after all this, it'll be the Labour Party which didn't implement this austerity that suffers the ultimate fate of losing.
All right. And Mr. Papadopoulos, is this the same Brexit will Johnson deliver the same Brexit that the people voted for during the referendum in 2016?
Well, you can apply that to general elections. You know, do people really know what they're voting for at a general election? You know, it's not just confined to the EU referendum. What I would say is this: if Jeremy Corbyn was to have stood a chance of winning this election, of being able to form a working Labour government, then he should have kept to the manifesto pledge in 2017, which clearly stated that a Labour government would respect the will of the UK public and withdraw Britain from the EU. The fact that he has now backtracked on that, in my opinion, will probably lose him this general election.
Okay. I'd like to thank our guest, Steve Keane, that is Professor of Economics and author of Debunking Economics. And we also had Marcus Papadopoulos, a publisher and editor at Politics First. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your contribution. Dear viewers, that's all the time we have for this edition of News Review.